Have you ever paused to consider what your retirement years will genuinely look like? Picture yourself navigating the intricate journey of aging, juggling financial limitations, meeting family expectations, and striving to maintain your independence. In this compelling video, we take a deep dive into the authentic struggles and pivotal decisions that seniors in the United States face every day. From the overwhelming expenses of hiring in-home caregivers and the often impersonal atmosphere of assisted living facilities to the emotional strain of living apart from loved ones, we reveal the stark realities that many elderly individuals encounter. But why should you watch until the very end? By understanding these challenges, you empower yourself to make informed decisions for your future or that of your cherished family members. You'll gain invaluable insights into preserving your dignity, managing your finances wisely, and nurturing healthier relationships within your family. Additionally, you'll hear uplifting stories of resilience and discover practical solutions that can revolutionize the way we approach aging. Join us on this enlightening journey to ensure that our elders enjoy their lives with the peace, respect, and happiness they truly deserve. Don't miss out on the essential knowledge that could significantly impact your future well-being. If you haven't subscribed yet, I highly recommend hitting that subscribe button and activating the notification bell so you never miss any of our insightful videos. Your support means the world to me, and if you found value in this video, you can help us continue spreading these important lessons by liking and sharing them with others. Engage with us. If the topic of this video resonates with you, please leave a comment with 1. If it doesn't, comment 0 to let us know how we can improve and create better content tailored to your interests. Now, let's embark on this important conversation. Firstly, I won't be able to hire a caregiver. My name is Michael Anderson, a retired factory worker living in a small town in Ohio. Currently, I receive a monthly pension of about $300. Even after 8 years, this pension will only see a modest increase, possibly reaching around $400. With the cost of living steadily rising, these amounts barely cover my necessities, let alone any additional services. Hiring a professional caregiver is simply out of reach financially. It's an unaffordable luxury for someone on my fixed income. Moreover, I have always been a private person. The idea of having strangers come into my home regularly is unsettling to me. It disrupts the sanctuary that my home represents, making me feel uncomfortable and insecure. The constant comings and goings of caregivers would not only intrude upon my personal space but also add a layer of stress and anxiety that I'm not prepared to handle. The thought of relying on someone else for my daily needs undermines my sense of independence and self-sufficiency, which I value deeply. In addition to the financial and emotional challenges, there's the matter of trust. Allowing a stranger into my home means entrusting them with my personal space and daily routines. This level of trust is hard to establish, especially when you're used to managing everything on your own. The uncertainty of whether a caregiver will respect my boundaries or understand my specific needs adds to my reluctance. I worry about the potential for misunderstandings or even mistreatment, which could further diminish my quality of life. Furthermore, the logistical aspect of hiring a caregiver poses its own set of difficulties. Coordinating schedules, managing payments, and ensuring consistent quality of care require a level of involvement and organization that I'm not ready to undertake. The administrative burden adds another layer of complexity, making the idea of hiring help even more daunting. Therefore, given my financial constraints, personal preferences, and the challenges associated with hiring a caregiver, I have decided that this is not a viable option for me. Instead, I am exploring alternative solutions that align better with my budget and comfort level, ensuring that I can maintain my independence while still receiving the support I need as I navigate my golden years. Secondly, I will not enter a nursing home. Nursing homes in the United States generally fall into two main categories: high-end and affordable. High-end nursing homes can cost upwards of $10,000 or even tens of thousands of dollars per month, depending on the level of care and amenities provided. With a modest pension of only $300 to $400 per month, affording such facilities is simply out of reach. The only option within my financial means would be the most affordable nursing homes, which typically offer shared rooms with a few other residents. However, this arrangement can quickly become monotonous and isolating. The lack of personalized care and the impersonal atmosphere often leave residents feeling neglected and undervalued. Moreover, my Aunt Susan Miller spent her last 10 years in a nursing home, and I witnessed her life there firsthand. In a shared room with 4 other elderly individuals, each bed was equipped with necessities like buckets for personal use, a stark reminder of the limited resources available. Despite the facility being advertised as a place of care and comfort, the reality was far from ideal. The staff, overworked and underpaid, often struggled to provide the attention and compassion that each resident deserved. They would routinely bring the elderly down from their beds to use these buckets after bathroom visits, treating each person more like an object than a human being. During mealtimes, the staff provided only minimal portions of food. If a resident indicated they were no longer hungry, the remaining food was promptly removed without any consideration for their comfort or dignity. Observing the elderly being treated with such indifference, almost as if they were less than pets, was both heartbreaking and terrifying. It became clear to me that the environment was not conducive to maintaining the quality of life that my aunt deserved. The constant shouting and lack of respectful interaction from the staff only exacerbated the feelings of oppression and helplessness among the residents. Living in a nursing home stripped my aunt of her independence and autonomy. Simple pleasures, like choosing what to eat or when to sleep, were no longer within her control. The impersonal nature of the facility made it difficult for her to form meaningful connections, leaving her feeling isolated and lonely despite being surrounded by others. This experience solidified my decision. I will not consider entering a nursing home. Instead, I am determined to explore alternative solutions that allow me to maintain my independence and dignity while receiving the support I need as I age. Choosing to stay in my own home means I can create an environment that feels safe, comfortable, and respectful. I can decide who enters my space and ensure that any assistance I receive aligns with my personal preferences and needs. While it may present its own set of challenges, the ability to live independently and maintain control over my daily life is invaluable. I am committed to finding ways to support myself that honor my desire for autonomy and preserve the quality of life that is so important to me. Thirdly, I will not go to my son's house to live. As we age, many of us face an array of health challenges. Our bodies begin to feel the wear and tear of years gone by, limbs become less flexible, our minds not as sharp, and maintaining personal hygiene becomes increasingly difficult. These changes introduce numerous inconveniences into daily life, making even simple tasks feel monumental. When elderly individuals start to lose confidence in themselves, inevitably, those around them may also begin to feel frustrated or overwhelmed. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Take, for example, my Uncle Robert Johnson. Over the years, Robert has battled arthritis, which makes walking and even holding utensils painful. His memory isn't what it once was, often forgets where he placed his keys or the names of new acquaintances. These struggles have led to moments of self-doubt and frustration, which in turn have strained his relationships with family members who find it hard to cope with the constant need for assistance. Furthermore, my children have demanding and stressful jobs. Both my daughter, Emily, and my son, David, work long hours in high-pressure environments. Emily is a project manager at a tech firm, while David is an attorney at a bustling law office. Their careers require significant time and energy, leaving them with little bandwidth to take on additional responsibilities at home. The thought of moving into their houses and becoming a constant source of stress and inconvenience is simply unbearable. The reality is, as retirees, we are no longer able to contribute to household chores or provide physical support the way we used to. Instead of being able to lend a hand, we might find ourselves sitting around all day, becoming more of a burden than a benefit. Waiting for our children to care for our meals and ensure our comfort can be demoralizing. This dynamic is completely unacceptable to me. I believe that being a burden on one's children is not only unfair but also disrupts the harmony and balance of family life. My values are rooted in independence and self-sufficiency, and I refuse to compromise these principles by moving into my son's house. A golden nest or a silver nest is no match for one's own home. There's a unique comfort in the familiarity of your own space. Even if the food isn't gourmet, perhaps the rice is cold and the soup is lukewarm, it's still comforting because it's made with love and memories. On the contrary, encountering a cold or distant demeanor from family members can be emotionally painful, making you long for the warmth and acceptance of your own home. When you grow old, it's crucial to hold on to your own house, regardless of its condition. Your home is a sanctuary built by your own hands, filled with personal history and cherished memories. Letting go of this space means letting go of a part of yourself. While loneliness in old age is an inevitable reality for many, maintaining your own home can help mitigate some of these feelings by providing a sense of control and continuity. Moreover, staying in your own home allows you to create an environment that reflects your personality and preferences. You can decorate as you please, keep your belongings organized in a way that makes sense to you, and enjoy the privacy that comes with having your own space. These aspects are invaluable and contribute significantly to your overall well-being and happiness. Choosing not to move into my son's house is a conscious decision to preserve my independence and dignity. It allows me to maintain my routines, stay in a familiar environment, and continue living life on my terms. While it may come with its own set of challenges, the benefits of staying true to myself and my values far outweigh the potential drawbacks of loneliness. I am committed to finding alternative solutions that support my independence, such as community resources, in-home assistance services that respect my privacy, and staying connected with family and friends to combat feelings of isolation. In essence, the choice to remain in my own home is about honoring the life I've built and ensuring that my golden years are spent in a way that brings me peace and fulfillment. It's a decision rooted in self-respect and the desire to live authentically, even in the face of the inevitable challenges that come with aging. Fourthly, I don't want to find a life partner to rely on in old age because two elderly people pairing up like that have no emotional foundation. When two people in their senior years seek companionship solely for practical reasons, there's usually a sense of emotional emptiness that follows. They often end up taking advantage of each other's weaknesses or desires, which can create an unhealthy dynamic. For example, although I'm retired and living off my pension, I have enough money to get by, around $400 a month. That's plenty to cover my daily needs. At this stage of life, I'm not consuming much. A small amount of food, a few changes of clothes, and the occasional outing are all I need. Plus, thanks to Medicare, I don't have to worry about healthcare costs. I don't need to rely on someone else financially. So, why would I look for a life partner? Isn't that just setting myself up for unnecessary drama? More often than not, relationships like these come with financial complications. Both partners usually have children of their own, and they are often focused on securing their children's future. This often leads to hidden agendas, as both individuals want to preserve resources for their own families. How can two people in that situation live together peacefully? How can they avoid constant calculations over who should pay for what, or which inheritance goes where? It's an exhausting and stressful way to live, and frankly, I'm not about to put myself in that kind of situation. I've worked hard for what I have, and I don't want to give it up or complicate things in my later years just to avoid being alone. It's much better to enjoy my independence, free from the pressure of navigating someone else's financial and emotional needs. Fifthly, I will cultivate my hobbies. Once people reach retirement age, they may no longer have a job to go to every day, but that doesn't mean their passions and interests should be put on hold. Retirement can be the perfect time to rediscover and fully embrace the hobbies that have always brought joy and fulfillment. For me, I've always had a deep love for physical activity. Whether it's taking a walk around the local park, stretching at the community center with other seniors, or even joining a group yoga class, staying active is something I enjoy every day. These simple exercises help me stay fit and connected with others in the same stage of life. In addition to physical activities, I also find immense pleasure in music. Whether it's listening to a favorite jazz album or tuning into a live concert on the radio, music brings me a sense of peace and joy that nothing else can. It's like a comfort blanket that wraps around me, reminding me of the good times and helping me focus on the present. Another hobby I've cultivated is reading. I've always been a book lover, but retirement has given me the time to dive deeper into novels and history books, and even listen to audiobooks during my afternoon walks. It's such a fulfilling way to expand my mind and escape into different worlds. Whether it's a gripping mystery or a thoughtful biography, reading has kept my days interesting, making me feel like there's always something new to learn and discover. Sixth, treat minor illnesses by going to the hospital, and give up severe illnesses. As I get older, I understand that health challenges are inevitable. If I experience common ailments, whether it's a mild headache, a runny nose, or some aches and pains, I make sure to see a doctor as soon as possible for an early diagnosis and treatment. It's important to take care of these things early so they don't spiral into more serious health issues. After all, staying on top of your health is the best way to maintain a good quality of life. However, I also know that as the years go by, certain things are out of my control. Eventually, there may come a time when I'm faced with a more serious illness. If that happens, and the illness is something that can't be cured, I've made peace with the idea of not pursuing aggressive treatments. I would choose not to prolong the inevitable with costly medical interventions that may only bring pain and suffering. There's no need to rack up medical bills or feel guilty about not fighting a battle that cannot be won. It's not just about money. It's about the emotional toll it takes on both myself and my loved ones. In the end, whether you're wealthy or not, we all face the same reality: birth and death. Rather than fighting against it, I believe it's healthier to accept the natural course of life with grace. I want to live the remainder of my days peacefully and with dignity, knowing that when my time comes, I'll embrace it without unnecessary fear or regret. It's a freeing thought, allowing me to live each day with a sense of calm, unburdened by the pressure to prolong life at any cost. Seventh, hire people to do housework as needed and order food externally. As I age, I know that there will come a time when certain tasks, like heavy lifting or intense housework, will no longer be manageable. And that's perfectly okay. I'm not going to stress over it. With the resources available today, I can easily hire help for the tasks I can't do myself. Whether it's cleaning, maintenance, or organizing, I can call on someone to lend a hand when needed. And when I'm not in the mood to cook, I can simply order takeout. The beauty of modern life is that everything is accessible with just a few taps on my phone. If I have the means, why not take advantage of the conveniences life offers? That said, I'll also continue to do what I can for myself as long as I'm able. While I still have the energy, I'll cook the meals I want, do my laundry, and keep my space clean. There's something deeply satisfying about maintaining your independence and taking pride in the small daily tasks that make life feel fulfilling. But when I need a break, I'll have no shame in taking the easy route, whether that's letting someone else handle the work or treating myself to a meal I didn't have to prepare. Ultimately, it's about having the freedom to do what I want, when I want. I'll eat what I enjoy, drink what I like, and take naps when the mood strikes. As I get older, I want my life to be as free and flexible as possible. I'll live on my terms, enjoying each day as it comes, without feeling burdened by unnecessary tasks or expectations. Life is short, and I'm determined to make the most of every moment. Eighth, do not enter the intensive care unit, ICU. As I approach the later years of my life, I've made one thing very clear to my family. I do not want to be placed in an ICU or subjected to life-sustaining measures if I can no longer take care of myself. If the time comes when I am no longer lucid and unable to make decisions for myself, I trust my son to handle it with compassion. But I've told him directly, if I reach a point where I can no longer think clearly or understand what's happening, and if there's no hope of recovery, Please do not put me through the pain of a breathing tube or any kind of futile resuscitation. As someone with a medical background, I understand the distress and discomfort those tubes cause, especially when someone has lost consciousness. It's a painful and degrading experience. And for what? To add a few more days or even hours of life that I would not be able to enjoy or understand. No, it's not worth it. I believe in accepting the natural course of life. Birth and death are inevitable. The outcome is the same for everyone, no matter how strong or heroic you might be. I don't want my family to endure unnecessary suffering or guilt. Instead, I want them to remember me for the love and care I gave during my lifetime, not the pain I might endure at the end. I've told my son that when the time comes, I simply want to pass peacefully, without invasive measures or dramatic interventions. Let everything unfold as it should. I don't need elaborate arrangements or an outpouring of attention from extended family and friends. Just knowing that my son is there, by my side, is enough for me. When I'm gone, I'll have no regrets, because I'll have lived my life on my terms, and I'll have left behind the legacy of a life well lived. As we grow older, it's natural that certain tasks, like heavy lifting or prolonged physical labor, may become too challenging. And that's okay. There's no shame in hiring help for things that are too demanding. I've always been a person who enjoys doing things myself. Cooking, cleaning, and tending to the house. But I realize that as I age, I may not have the same energy I once did. So, if I can no longer do everything myself, I'll hire someone to help with the more strenuous tasks. Ordering food when I don't feel like cooking is another way to simplify life. In today's world, life has become so convenient. With a little extra money, you can easily get food delivered or hire someone to help out. We live in a time where you don't have to struggle if you don't want to. For me, the key is to stay flexible. When I'm able to do things for myself, I will cook my meals, clean, and keep things in order. But when I'm too tired or it becomes too much, I will hire help or order food. Life shouldn't be about struggling to keep up with tasks that no longer bring me joy or peace. At this stage of life, I believe in freedom. The freedom to do what I want when I want. To rest when I feel like it, to cook or clean, or simply sit back and relax. It's about enjoying the simplicity of life, and knowing when to ask for help when I need it. This is the kind of life I want to create for myself. One where I can embrace the things I enjoy and let go of the things that cause unnecessary stress. Whether it's cooking, cleaning, or just having a good meal brought to me, I'll take it all in stride. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. When we arrived at the funeral, I was shocked at the atmosphere. I had expected it to be a very somber occasion, but only Ha's husband seemed deeply affected. His eyes were red from crying, but her son and daughter-in-law, both of them appeared almost detached from the whole situation. Her son, in particular, seemed completely indifferent. He was wearing mourning clothes, but instead of grieving, he was smoking, playing games on his phone, and completely absorbed in them. Whenever visitors arrived, it was Ha's husband who would greet them. The entire scene felt strange to me, especially given how young Ha was when she passed away. I couldn't understand how her son could be so unaffected by his mother's sudden death. Later, we had a meal at the funeral, and after spending some time there, we left to head back to the city. During the drive, I couldn't help but reflect on everything I had seen. I started to ask our class leader more about Ha's life, wondering how someone so full of life could pass so suddenly. A month earlier, Ha was perfectly healthy, and her illness hadn't been diagnosed as incurable. The class leader then shared with us the story of Ha's life, a life that had, unfortunately, been shaped by her son in ways no one could have predicted. It turns out that Ha had lived a life that many would have envied. She had attended a technical school and was then assigned to a stable job at a state-owned factory. Both she and her husband worked there for years, and they had only one child, a son. Much like my own family, they adored their son and gave him everything they could: love, attention, and material support. But, just as with many parents, their sacrifices seemed to go unnoticed by their son. From an early age, Ha's son was rebellious. He refused to study and failed his university entrance exams. Instead of trying harder, he dropped out of continuing education and started his own business. Ha and her husband, desperate to see him succeed, poured all their savings into funding his business. But after 3 years, his venture collapsed, leaving them with nothing but debt. Even after this setback, their son still demanded a lavish wedding, and his wife insisted on an exorbitant dowry. To make ends meet, Ha and her husband had to borrow a significant amount of money, over $1 million in today's terms, to finance the wedding. Even after the wedding, they struggled with debt. Ha retired, but the debt still loomed over them, and their son continued to demand their attention. He and his wife, despite their financial difficulties, expected Ha to take care of their child. And so, Ha found herself acting as a full-time caregiver to her grandchild, running errands, cooking, and serving her son and daughter-in-law, all while her pension was being spent on their expenses. Despite all of this, Ha never complained. She continued to care for them, pouring everything she had into her son's family. But the toll it took on her health was evident. The stress, both emotional and physical, began to weigh heavily on her. After years of caring for her family, her health began to deteriorate. One afternoon, after putting her grandchild down for a nap, Ha suddenly collapsed from chest pain. Thankfully, her daughter-in-law was home and called for an ambulance in time. The doctors said she needed immediate surgery to survive. But, once again, they were faced with financial ruin. The initial cost of the surgery was over $10,000, and that was only for the first procedure. Additional treatment would be needed, and they had no savings left. The only asset they had left was their house, worth over $100,000. If they sold it, they could cover her medical expenses, but their son didn't want to part with it. Instead, they turned to fundraising online and asked relatives and friends for help, but no one could lend them money. Eventually, they borrowed a portion of the needed funds but still didn't have enough to cover the full cost of treatment. Ha was given only partial care, and after being discharged, she returned home to rest. But just 30 days later, she passed away quietly in her sleep. The class leader hinted that Ha might have been emotionally broken by her son's behavior. She believed that if Ha had not been so dedicated to her son's family and had taken better care of herself, she might have lived longer. Although I wasn't sure how much of that was speculation, seeing Ha's son's behavior at the funeral made me think twice. If I had a son who acted like that, I, too, would be furious. After returning to the city, I couldn't stop reflecting on my own life. Ha's story shook me. Here I was, taking on so much for my son, thinking that if I did everything for him, he would take care of me in my old age. But after seeing Ha's fate, I started to question my own choices. Was I making the right decisions for my future? Would I, too, end up sacrificing everything for my son, only to be left alone in my old age with nothing to show for it? It was a sobering realization that made me rethink the way I was living my life. I could relate deeply to Ha's life story. For many years, I had been staying at my son's house, taking care of all the little things that seemed to always pile up. But despite my efforts, my son and his wife never really appreciated it. Over time, it became clear that they were increasingly relying on me, yet their attitude toward me had shifted. It used to be that they'd send me money to cover living expenses, but as time passed, they started taking my pension to support their costs. Even though my husband and I had managed to pay off all our debts and were no longer under any financial pressure, I found myself growing more anxious every day. The thought of always spending money on my son, without ever setting anything aside for ourselves, troubled me. What would happen if both my husband and I fell seriously ill, and we didn't have enough funds to cover treatment? What if my son didn't have the money to help, or worse, refused to sell the house to pay for our medical bills? My mind raced with these worries, and the more I thought about it, the more anxious I became. When we returned to our old house in the city, a familiar wave of melancholy washed over me. I saw my husband's gray hair, his aging hands gripping my son's old phone, and the sight of him smoking cheap cigarettes in the corner of the living room. All of a sudden, I was overwhelmed with sadness. It struck me how much our married life had been consumed by responsibilities, sacrifices, and constant struggles. People our age should be relaxing and enjoying their golden years, but here we were, still fighting to support our children and grandchildren. At first, I had planned to spend just one night at our old house before taking the bus back to my son's place the next day. But after an evening spent talking with my husband about Haas' tragic story, my struggles at my son's house, and the toll our years of marriage had taken on us, something inside me changed. That night, I came to a powerful realization. For the rest of my life, I had to start living for myself. I needed to enjoy life and stop sacrificing everything for my son's family. I also realized that my son's constant requests for money had left us with little to show for ourselves. I feared that, after giving him everything we had, we would find ourselves in the same situation as Ha, alone, struggling, and unappreciated. If we ever needed our son's help in the future, would he be there for us? Or would he, like Ha's son, ignore us and leave us to fend for ourselves? These thoughts gnawed at me. 2 months ago, after attending Ha's funeral, I made a decision. I would stay with my husband, and I would no longer go to my son's house. I knew he would probably call me selfish or accuse me of being inconsiderate, but I no longer cared. I had already given enough, and it was time for me to take back some control over my own life. What made matters worse was that my grandson was now in kindergarten, so I no longer had to take care of him. The responsibility for raising him had fallen squarely on my son and his wife. My husband and I deserved to enjoy our old age without constantly being pulled back into the demands of our children. But my son made a comment that struck a nerve. He said, "Why is it that my wife's mother gets all the care, while you're living alone and I don't take care of you?" This statement made me feel humiliated. If a man takes care of his wife's parents but leaves his mother to live alone, how would people judge him? The obvious answer is that he would be seen as neglectful, unfilial, and selfish. But the truth is, sometimes the situation is more complicated than it seems. Some sons are kind to their wives' families but cold to their own, often due to circumstances beyond their control. A colleague of mine, named Jake, found himself in a similar situation, and his story puzzled many people. Jake, who was 3 years younger than me, and I worked together for nearly 10 years. We started in the same department, and later I was promoted and transferred to a new one. Over the years, we became close friends, like brothers. We shared laughs, frustrations, and personal stories, and I always admired how responsible and family-oriented he was. To others, Jake seemed like the ideal man, always dependable, respectful, and hard-working. He was the kind of person who never overindulged, didn't hang out late at bars, and always brought home any good news to share with his family. His colleagues thought he was the perfect man, and so did I. But last weekend, I found myself visiting his house, and I stumbled upon a shocking revelation. It was just the two of us at his house. We were sitting in his living room, enjoying tea, and chatting about work and life. I had planned to stay for just a short while, but as I sipped my tea, something unexpected happened. Jake's mother arrived, looking furious, and she stormed in without even acknowledging me. She didn't bother to greet me and immediately began yelling at Jake. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Why aren't you taking care of me? Why are you taking care of your wife instead of me?" Jake, visibly frustrated, stayed silent as if he were trying to maintain his composure. His mother, however, didn't stop. She accused him of being ungrateful, of abandoning her after his marriage, and for not bringing her to live with him. The scene was uncomfortable, and I felt out of place, unsure whether I should intervene or stay silent. The argument escalated quickly, and soon Jake was practically dragging his mother out of the house. Their voices grew louder, and it became clear that this was a long-standing issue between them. Finally, Jake, exhausted by the confrontation, said something that stunned his mother into silence. "When you married Dad," he said, "your mother didn't give you a dowry, and you didn't help us. Your mother never cared for us, and now you expect me to take care of you." His words seemed to strike a chord. His mother began crying and left without saying another word. Jake returned to his seat as if nothing had happened, calmly continuing our tea. I was taken aback by how calmly he handled it, but I also felt that the situation could have been handled more respectfully. After all, it was his mother, and no matter the circumstances, we owe respect to those who gave us life. Later, Jake explained the complicated dynamics of his family, and I finally understood why he felt the way he did. Jake's mother had always favored his younger brother, neglecting her daughter and treating Jake coldly. To provide for his brother's education, Jake had to quit school after middle school and start working to support him. His sister had done the same, sacrificing her education to help their brother. Jake had given up his future for his brother, and yet, his mother never showed any gratitude. Over 20 years ago, when Jake was in his early 20s, he experienced a tragic loss. His father, a hard-working man, died in a work accident, leaving behind a small compensation of $12,000. While Jake's mother had always been a stern, practical woman, this was a blow that shattered his expectations of her. The money, which was meant to provide some financial cushion for the family after such a tragedy, was handled in a way that broke Jake's heart. Instead of using it wisely or saving it for the future, his mother's actions felt cold and indifferent to Jake. He couldn't understand why his mother seemed to treat the compensation money as if it were just another expense to be quickly forgotten, rather than something that could help him secure a future. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. 2 years after his father's death, at the age of 30, Jake finally found a woman he loved, and they were ready to get married. However, when he went to his mother to ask for a dowry, something his mother had always insisted on for her children to marry, he was met with resistance. She initially refused, saying that in true love, dowries shouldn't be a burden and should be modest. Then, she claimed that she had no money to give him. Her words stung Jake deeply, especially as he was already struggling to make ends meet. He tried to reason with her, but she was adamant. Jake and his wife should manage their wedding costs without any help from her. It was a sharp contrast to the kind of support he had hoped to receive from his mother at such a significant moment in his life. Jake's future in-laws, however, were sympathetic to his situation, learning that he had recently lost his father and understanding the financial strain he was under. They decided to lower the dowry to a much more reasonable amount of $400, and Jake and his fiancée covered the rest of the wedding expenses themselves. Despite these struggles, Jake and his wife were grateful for his in-laws' generosity. After the wedding, they went above and beyond to make sure the couple was set up for a stable life. His in-laws even waived their contributions to help the newlyweds save money for their future together. A year later, Jake's wife gave birth to their first child. During the pregnancy, she had stayed at her mother's house, so it was expected that once the baby arrived, Jake's family would step in to help care for them. However, Jake's mother only stayed with them for a month before she returned to her brother's house to assist with his family. Her decision left Jake feeling both hurt and confused. At the time, her younger brother and his wife were not yet married, and his mother was expected to perform all sorts of household chores like cooking and cleaning, essentially acting as a servant. It was a far cry from the support he had hoped for from his mother. When Jake's son turned 2.5 and was ready for kindergarten, Jake and his wife decided to buy a home in the city. They had saved up enough for the down payment, but they still needed about $12,000 to complete the interior decoration. Jake thought of the compensation money his father had left behind, so he went to his mother, hoping she might be willing to contribute. But when he asked, he was devastated to learn that the entire sum had been given to his younger brother, who had used it to start a business and buy a house. This revelation left Jake feeling betrayed, as he had always assumed that the money would be shared among the children, not solely given to one. In contrast, his wife's parents, upon hearing about Jake's situation, immediately offered to help. They gave him the $12,000 he needed to complete the house. Jake was deeply moved by their kindness, and from that point on, he made a point of visiting his in-laws during the holidays. However, his biological mother didn't take kindly to this. She began accusing him of forgetting his roots, saying that Jake had married his wife and, in doing so, had betrayed his mother. She called his wife a schemer, claiming that she had manipulated Jake into forgetting about her. Their relationship continued to deteriorate as his mother made hurtful comments about his wife, creating a divide between mother and son. Over the years, Jake began to resent his mother more and more. He stopped visiting her during the holidays, and it became clear to him that he could never satisfy her demands. Jake's mother, after being displaced from her younger son's house, came back to him, asking to live with his family. She had been kicked out by her youngest son once her grandson started attending kindergarten, and her situation had become dire. Her resentment toward Jake grew when he refused her request, using the excuse that his apartment was too small to accommodate her. The truth, however, was that Jake's home, though small, could easily fit another person with a little rearranging. The real reason Jake turned her down was because, at that time, his mother-in-law had recently lost her husband and also wanted to live with them to be cared for. Jake had already promised his mother-in-law that she could stay with them, and he couldn't bear to break his word. When Jake's mother found out about this arrangement, she was furious. She stormed to the city in a taxi, demanding to be let into Jake's home. What followed was the intense confrontation I witnessed that day, where his mother accused him of being ungrateful and forgetting his duty to her. While many would look at Jake's situation and see a son who was neglecting his mother, the reality was far more complex. In truth, Jake was torn between the needs of his biological mother and the obligations he had to his wife, who had supported him through so much. Despite the tension between them, Jake continued to support his mother financially. Since she had moved back to her hometown, Jake sent money each month, around $120 to cover her living expenses. His younger brother, who lived closer, contributed as well, though Jake couldn't be sure that his brother ever gave his mother anything. In total, they sent her over $200 every month, which, along with her pension, was more than enough for her to live comfortably in the countryside. Next, I'll move on to the section about Kwang's travel experiences. 6 years after retiring, my husband, Kwang, and I had tried just about every type of travel we could think of. We were always enthusiastic about exploring the world, seeing new places, and enriching our lives. But over time, we realized that the ways we had traveled in our younger years, group tours, independent travel, and even road trips, were no longer as comfortable or enjoyable for us in our later years. Hi everyone, my name is Kwang, and I'm 66 years old. I'm a retired civil servant, and my wife retired 5 years before I did. We've always loved traveling, especially when we were younger. During our early years together, we used to hike in the mountains, explore different coasts, and enjoy the great outdoors. But after marriage, with the addition of children and the demands of work, our travel plans became fewer and farther between. We mostly traveled for business or to visit relatives, and even when we did take vacations, they were often filled with obligations like taking care of grandchildren rather than just enjoying the journey. As we entered our retirement years, we decided to make travel a bigger priority. We tried all the popular types of travel: group tours, independent travel with friends, and self-driving road trips. But after 6 years of traveling in all these ways, we both realized that these methods were no longer as suitable for people our age. Group tours were often exhausting, with long days and little flexibility. Independent travel could be stressful when trying to coordinate everything on our own, and road trips, while fun, had their challenges in terms of comfort and flexibility. What we found worked best for us in our later years was a slower, more relaxed form of travel. We wanted more time to enjoy the places we visited, without rushing from one site to the next. We also realized that we needed to make our trips more about the experience and less about the destination. After I retired, my husband and I decided to embrace the joy of travel. Initially, we opted for the traditional group tours, as they seemed like the most convenient choice. Everything from meals to accommodations and transportation was taken care of by the travel agencies. All we had to do was show up, and everything was arranged for us. The tours were relatively inexpensive, costing just a few $100s, and over 2 years, we had already visited many different places. In the spring, we went hiking. During the summer, we enjoyed beach destinations. And in the autumn and winter, we traveled south to escape the colder weather. At that time, travel truly felt like a way to enrich our lives and add meaning to our retirement. On average, we would travel 2 to 3 times every quarter, and during months when the weather was ideal and tour prices were lower, we sometimes found ourselves traveling 4 to 5 times per quarter, essentially spending nearly the entire month on the road. However, after 2 years of traveling with tour groups, we began to feel that this type of travel was taking a toll on us. The trips often took us to crowded, noisy destinations where we felt like we were part of a herd rather than travelers seeking a relaxing experience. We spent most of our time jostling to get on buses, fighting through crowds in restaurants, and rushing through tourist attractions. The meals were typically prearranged, and if we wanted to try any local specialties, we had to pay extra. We also noticed that travel with tour groups was becoming more expensive as time went on. Walking long distances in crowded areas became tiresome, and the overall experience was far from relaxing. Eventually, my husband and I decided to step away from organized tours and no longer participate in that type of travel. Next, we decided to try independent group travel. I joined a free travel group specifically for middle-aged and elderly people. The group consisted of like-minded friends who shared the same love of travel. We would plan trips together, rent a car, and hire a student to act as our guide. This type of travel was much more flexible and allowed us to experience places in a new way. We could create our itinerary and enjoy activities like games, music, and campfires, which made each trip more enjoyable. After a few trips, I found myself enjoying the experience. It was much more fun than the structured tour group format. However, organizing independent group trips proved to be challenging. Coordinating schedules among a group of people with different availabilities was often difficult, and sometimes we couldn't get enough people to go on a trip. Despite our best efforts, there were months when we planned to travel to 3 or 4 different locations but ended up only managing to organize one trip. There were even times when we couldn't manage any trips at all, despite planning the entire month. It became clear that we couldn't rely on the independent travel group to fulfill our travel desires, so we decided to seek another solution. That's when I came across the idea of self-driving travel, which seemed to be a popular choice among older travelers. Many elderly people were traveling independently by car, going wherever they wanted, at their own pace, and it sounded like the perfect solution for us. We already had a car that we had purchased 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been driving for over a decade. We also felt a bit of regret about the short trips we had taken before, so we decided to try self-driving travel. We started visiting some of the places we had already been to, simply following directions from Google Maps. Initially, it was a great experience, traveling comfortably, enjoying delicious food, and having complete freedom. We alternated between self-driving trips and independent group travel, and this mix kept us excited about exploring new places. However, after several trips, we started to see the drawbacks of both types of travel. While self-driving offered us freedom, it also came with its own set of challenges. Driving long distances frequently, especially as we got older, became tiring. By the time we reached a destination and checked into a hotel, I was often too exhausted to do much else. I would just want to rest and have no energy left to go out and explore the city. The costs were also significantly higher. When traveling with a tour group, we could split hotel costs among several people, which made it affordable. 2 people sharing a room would pay about 300 to 400,000 VND. However, when we traveled on our own, hotel prices were higher, with budget accommodations starting around 500 to 600,000 VND per night. On top of that, fuel costs and toll fees added up quickly, making self-driving travel far more expensive than any of the other methods we had tried. Despite having relatively high pensions, almost 20 million VND per month, self-driving travel still felt like an extravagant choice, especially after factoring in the cost of daily living expenses. After exploring all the nearby tourist spots, we decided to give up self-driving travel. It simply no longer suited our lifestyle or age. Then, last year, I received an invitation from an old classmate in Hanam to visit her son's farm for 5 days. This trip turned out to be a turning point for us, as it sparked a new travel idea, combining travel with relaxation. Previously, my husband and I would rush through each destination, checking off tourist spots, taking photos, and hurrying to the next location. We never really had the chance to relax and take in the beauty of each place. During our visit to the farm in Hanam, we had the chance to experience life as the locals did. It made me realize that travel doesn't have to be about rushing through as many tourist attractions as possible. It can be a more relaxed, fulfilling experience. We decided to try a new approach. We would pack our bags, take a train or flight to a city, and rent an apartment or homestay for a while. The convenience of using ride-sharing services and public transportation meant we didn't need to drive ourselves anymore. Renting an apartment or homestay was also cheaper than staying in hotels, and if we chose places with kitchen facilities, we could save even more by preparing some of our meals. This new approach to travel felt incredibly freeing. It was less about the rush to visit every site and more about enjoying each place at our own pace. We could do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted, without the pressure of itineraries or crowds. Over the past year, my husband and I have been experimenting with a new way of traveling that combines exploration with relaxation. Except for the 4 months around the holidays, we've spent most of the other 8 months living away from home, enjoying the freedom of self-sufficiency. We've been shopping for our own food, cooking, and living as though we've moved to a new city. It has been incredibly comfortable and stress-free. This form of travel has brought us so much joy. There are no worries, no conflicts, and no rushing around. It feels like we've relocated to a new city, just without the pressures of settling in. When you think about it carefully, isn't that what travel is all about? Leaving behind the familiar and exploring new places, cities you've never lived in before? In this sense, I now realize that combining travel with relaxation is the ideal way for people like us, middle-aged and older, to spend our later years. It allows us to enjoy our retirement in a way that feels both comfortable and meaningful, without the rush and stress that often come with traditional vacations. Recently, I've had time to reflect on how our priorities and perceptions of life have changed as we've gotten older. When I was younger, I always believed that having children was the most important thing. I came from a rural background, where we weren't extremely poor, but life was a constant struggle. I held on to the belief that if you had children, you'd always have someone to rely on in old age. The more children you had, the more each one would contribute, and in the end, that was supposed to ensure a comfortable and peaceful life in retirement. However, my perspective shifted not long ago when I had to admit my 68-year-old aunt into the hospital. I realized that, in today's world, children, no matter how many you have, are not necessarily the solution to old age. Having a savings account is far more reliable. 2 months ago, while I was still working, I received a phone call from my father saying my aunt, who lived alone in the countryside, had fallen and needed urgent help. At that moment, I felt a bit irritated. After all, my aunt had 3 children. Her youngest son worked far away, but her older son and daughter both lived nearby, had cars, and could reach her in just over an hour. Why did I have to drop everything and go back to the countryside? If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. But my father said he couldn't reach her other children, and we had to wait for them to arrive. I couldn't say no, so I drove the 25-minute distance from my workplace. When I arrived at my aunt's house, I was horrified by what I saw. Her legs were badly injured, swollen and bruised, and I immediately asked when the fall had happened. She hesitated and told me it had been 3 days. I was furious. Why didn't you go to the doctor sooner? Why didn't you tell your children? I demanded. She simply cried and didn't say anything more. I felt a deep sense of sympathy but didn't press her further. I told her to pack a few things and drove her to the hospital in the city. Her condition was severe. At first, I thought about taking her to a higher-level hospital for a thorough examination, but she insisted on going to the district hospital. "That's enough," she said. "I don't want to burden anyone with the costs." I realized she was afraid of the expenses, so I tried to reassure her. I told her that her children would help with the costs, but she refused, saying, "Don't let them know about this." My aunt handed me some money wrapped in a newspaper. This was all she had, and asked me to take her to the smaller, less expensive hospital. She kept saying that if the money ran out, we should just go home. At that point, I had no choice but to admit her to the hospital and start the process. I called her children to inform them, but the responses I received left me both angry and heartbroken. First, I called her eldest son, but he didn't even ask about her condition. Instead, he cursed her, saying, "What kind of person are you? Always causing trouble for your children." Next, I called her daughter, who said she couldn't come home because she was busy at work. She told me to contact her other siblings. Her second daughter told me that it wasn't her responsibility to help, adding that when she married, her mother didn't let her bring her dowry, and she had to take care of herself without any support. "Why should I ask my parents to help me now?" she said coldly. Finally, I reached her youngest son, but he said he was too busy with work to come. Their combined financial contribution was a mere 11 million VND, along with the small amount my aunt had given me. This was still not enough for the surgery she needed. Seeing my aunt in so much pain, knowing that the money was insufficient, broke my heart. If only my aunt had kept some of her husband's compensation money for herself, rather than giving it to her youngest son, she might not have had to suffer so much. Perhaps that money wouldn't have allowed her to live luxuriously, but at least, in times like this, she would have had some financial security to take care of herself. It made me realize how important it is to save and plan for the future, especially as we get older. No matter how many children you have, they may not always be able to help when you need it most. Having financial independence, whether through savings, investments, or other forms of security, can make all the difference in your later years. It's something I now wish my aunt had understood earlier. As we reflect on these experiences, it's clear that life lessons, especially as we grow older, often come from unexpected places. Whether it's realizing the value of financial independence, understanding the true meaning of family, or discovering what kind of travel brings us the most joy, we all have the power to shape our future in ways that bring peace and happiness. So, what have you learned from today's story? Think about it. What's one thing from this video that you can start applying to your own life? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear how these insights have resonated with you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on living a fulfilling, meaningful life at every stage. Thank you for watching.